Hey y'all, this is the second lesson that we would have covered today if we had enough time. This is the lesson on 3 kinds of knowledge. So why is it important to know these 3 kinds of knowledge? 2 reasons. Knowing what kind of knowledge you're expected to gain in each of the classes that you're taking will help you understand why and how to learn it. It will empower you. In fact, that's what this next slide talks about. Understanding Bloom's taxonomy, which is what we just learned about, and the 3 kinds of knowledge is empowering. You'll know what to do with the knowledge presented to you and also how to think about that knowledge in order to learn it. So the 3 types begin with declarative. So declarative statements state facts. So here are some examples. The transatlantic slave trade transported between 10 and 12 million Africans across the Atlantic Ocean. The COVID-19 pandemic has caused many people to lose their jobs. Online learning requires many hours of studying on your own. These are just statements. You can look them up to see if they're true, to see if they're false. They don't necessarily have to be true in order to be a declarative statement. You could also have declarative statements in your math class. So for instance, 0 is a number just like all other numbers. Numbers continue infinitely because you can always add one more, okay? So again, they don't even have to be things that you understand. They're just facts. Things that can be true, things that can be false. They're just facts. And if you think about the level of thinking that this kind of knowledge accords most with, it would be, on Bloom's taxonomy, it would be remembering or knowledge. The second level is called, or the second kind of knowledge is called procedural. So math is a great example of a subject where you learn lots of procedural steps. You're expected to learn how to perform different functions, and there's an order to those operations. Okay, so knowing that procedural knowledge is expected of you in this class helps you to understand that the purpose of the learning for that information is to follow certain procedures and steps. So what I did, I will not read every one of these steps to you, but I just went to equation cliff notes and I copied a few of the steps to solve a particular problem. And this one says, in order to solve an equation, follow these steps. This is a perfect example of procedural knowledge. There are 4 steps there. You've got to do them in that order, okay? Think of what else you might do that would require procedural knowledge. In other words, steps that you must follow. The last kind is conditional, okay? So for what classes are you required to use conditional knowledge? Well, here's what that is. Math may be a great example again, but the purpose of this knowledge is so that you would know when and why to use certain information. In other words, conditional knowledge requires you to know when and why to use that information. So here's an example of that. Let's say that your instructor provides you with 5 mathematical formulas and 10 problems to solve. So your instructor is not going to say use this formula for that problem, use another formula for this problem. Instructor just gave you the formulas and then gave you all of the problems. It's up to you to know when and why to use a formula on a particular problem. Okay? That's conditional knowledge. It's not enough just to know it. It's not enough to be able to follow some steps. You've got to know when and why to use it. So if we were going to put in order the level of difficulty according to these knowledges, declarative would be at the bottom, okay? That would be the type of knowledge that is requires the least amount of thinking, okay? And then the procedural knowledge would require just a little more thinking because you've got to know the steps of a particular process, okay? And then the conditional knowledge, of course, would be the most complex because it's not enough just to know those facts, the declarative knowledge. It's not enough just to know steps, and you know this in math if your teacher has given you several formulas to use and several problems to solve using any of those formulas. Knowing the steps of those formulas is just not enough. You've got to have conditional knowledge so that you know when and why to use various formulas. Now, I've used math as an example, but of course, math is not the only example. Let's look at this particular activity, and I'm going to let you take a minute to read each one of those scenarios, 1 through 7, and I want you to decide which one of those kinds of knowledge is described there. You can pause it right here to take a look at that. The answers to the questions are here on this particular slide, so you can take your time in reading those responses at the bottom, see if you can justify them. Why are those the correct answers? And here's your assignment. So on a Word document, you're going to list the courses that you're taking this semester. Now, most of you are taking this course during the summer, which means a lot of you may just be taking the one course, or you might be taking 2 courses, okay? If you're taking 2 courses, I'd like you to do this assignment on both of your courses. If you're taking just one course right now, do this assignment for the course that you're currently taking, which is this one, and then choose another course that you most recently took. Maybe your last course was in the last semester of high school. Maybe you were in some type of course, maybe not even a college course, but some type of course in some other capacity. Pick a course that you took most recently and apply what we're going to do on this assignment to that course. Under each course, write the kind of knowledge or knowledges that the learning requires. Under that, write a statement that explains how that knowledge is declarative, procedural, or conditional, and then include an example. So I've given you an example of what you're going to write on your assignment, okay? So let's say that I take algebra. I'd put number 1, algebra. That's the topic, that's the subject that I'm taking. Number 2, my algebra class requires declarative, procedural, and conditional knowledge. I've made that decision. Whatever class you decide, it may not require all 3 of those. Think about it. Does it require just declarative? Does it require declarative and procedural? Or some other combination? Okay, so that's number 2. My algebra class requires declarative, procedural, and conditional. Now on number 3, I'm going to demonstrate how my class requires those knowledges. So here's an example for that. Memorizing a formula requires declarative knowledge. For example, I must memorize, and then you tell what the formula is that you've had to memorize. Using the formulas according to the right steps and procedures requires procedural knowledge. For example, and then you're going to list the steps for solving a particular problem. This is exactly how you're going to do your assignment, so pay close attention. And then the last one, knowing when and why to use the formulas requires conditional knowledge. For example, if an equation requires solving for x on both sides of the equal sign, I must use, and then tell the formula that you must use. You're going to do a total of 2 courses this way. Okay, so definitely this course because you're taking it now, but then also choose one, as I said earlier, that you have recently taken. And so you'll have a total of 2 courses that you've examined. Do not forget your examples. So it won't be just enough to say, the course I'm taking this semester requires declarative knowledge, and that's it. You've got to put all of this information there so that you're demonstrating to me that you do have an understanding of what those 3 knowledges are and the differences among all of them. And like I said, you're going to repeat the steps for each of the 2 classes that you are currently taking, or that maybe one of them you took in the most recent past.